Look, most people in their 20s think the biggest financial milestones are the obvious ones. Getting your first real job, moving out, buying your first car that is not held together by pure hope, maybe starting a retirement account if they are feeling really wild. And sure, all of that is important. But here's the thing, almost nobody realizes until they hit their 30s and suddenly feel like they are 10 years behind. There's actually one milestone in your 20s that matters way more than all the others combined. And almost everybody misses it. Not because they are lazy, not because they are irresponsible, but because nobody ever told them this is the milestone that actually changes their entire financial trajectory. Stay with me here, because if you are in your 20s right now, or even your early 30s, and you get this one thing right, you will feel like the entire financial game suddenly becomes easier. And if you miss it, well, you will spend decades trying to make up for a mistake you did not even know you were making. This is the part nobody talks about. The milestone that most people assume they will eventually get around to, but by the time they finally think about it, the compounding window that would have changed their entire life has already slammed shut. And this is the part that really stings. Most people are out here stressing about promotions, side hustles, moving to a cheaper city, figuring out if they should stop buying iced coffees, when the real thing they should have been focused on happens long before any of that even matters. My name is Michael, and I help people understand money the way school never did. I break things down calmly, simply, and without the guru nonsense, so you can actually keep more of your money and stop feeling stressed about it. And today, we are going to talk about the financial milestone that most people miss in their 20s, why it matters so much, and how to fix it starting right now. Here is the milestone, the real one, the one that changes everything. Building your first $100,000. That is the milestone. Not buying a house, not getting a certain salary, not starting a business, not even paying off every debt you have. The milestone that matters more than anything else in your 20s is hitting $100,000 in invested assets, not savings. Not cash sitting in your bank slowly dying from inflation. Invested money. Money that is actually working for you instead of waiting for you to work for it. And the reason this milestone is such a big deal is simple. The first $100,000 is the hardest money you will ever make in your entire life. Every dollar after that becomes exponentially easier. But most people never get there early enough to actually take advantage of that compounding window. Let me break this down point by point, because this is where it gets interesting. Point 1. The first $100,000 is not about the number. It is about the discipline. Most people think the hardest part of building wealth is earning more money. But the truth is, the hardest part is learning how to not instantly spend every dollar the second it shows up in your account, and that is why the first $100,000 is less about the number and more about the discipline it forces you to build. In your 20s, money feels like water. It just slips through your fingers no matter how hard you try to hold on to it. One day you swear you are saving, and the next thing you know, you are ordering takeout again because cooking felt emotionally exhausting. Or you are buying clothes you convinced yourself were on sale. Or you are going out for drinks even though you promised to stay in because it has been a long week. But when you decide you are actually going to hit that first $100,000, something shifts. You start paying attention. You stop pretending your spending habits are normal. You stop lying to yourself about what you deserve. You begin to see that every small financial decision either pulls you closer to that milestone or pushes it further away. And the crazy part is, once you start acting like someone who can save $100,000, you stop feeling like money controls you and start feeling like you control it. Point 2. Compounding does not work at full power until you have real money invested. Compounding feels like this magical financial concept everyone talks about, but in your 20s, it mostly feels like a scam because the numbers are so small you can barely see anything happening. And that is exactly why most people underestimate how powerful it becomes once you finally have real money invested. When you have $5,000 in an account and it grows 8%, you make $400, which feels like the financial equivalent of finding spare change in your couch cushions. Even at $10,000, an 8% return is $800. And while that is nice, it is not exactly making you rethink your career path. But once you hit $100,000, everything flips. That same 8% suddenly becomes $8,000, completely passive, earned while you were sleeping, working, procrastinating, or ordering groceries you should have just picked up yourself. That is when compounding stops feeling theoretical and starts feeling real, because your money is now large enough to create more money without your constant effort. And here's the part nobody realizes until they experience it. Compounding rewards early starters, not big earners. Even small contributions in your 20s become monsters later, but only if you actually get enough invested early for compounding to flex its full power. Point 3. You cannot afford to miss the compounding window in your 20s. Most people don't realize they only get one real compounding window in their life, and it happens in their 20s, long before they feel financially ready for anything, which is exactly why missing it hurts so much later. In your 20s, every dollar you invest is basically buying extra years of growth, and those years are worth more than any raise, promotion, or clever investment strategy you will ever come up with in your 30s or 40s. But because the results don't show up immediately, people assume it doesn't matter yet, so they wait. They wait until they make more, until life settles down, until they feel stable. And by the time that moment finally arrives, they've already lost the one advantage they could never get back. And the emotional consequence of that sneaks up on people. They hit 30 and suddenly feel behind without knowing why. They look at their retirement projections and realize the math no longer works unless they save aggressively in a decade, when everything is more expensive and every decision comes with real consequences. It is painfully simple. Time does 90% of the work, but only if you give it those early years. Without them, you are basically trying to run a marathon after skipping the first 10 miles. Point 4. Your 20s are the cheapest decade to invest in. Your 20s are secretly the cheapest decade you will ever have, not because you are rolling in cash, but because you have the fewest real obligations, and that makes it the perfect time to invest aggressively even if your income feels embarrassingly low. This is the decade when you can live with roommates without it ruining your ego. When driving an older car doesn't feel like a failure, when eating simple meals isn't some dramatic downgrade, and when your life is flexible enough that you can cut expenses without needing a family meeting and a spreadsheet. But instead of taking advantage of that freedom, most people upgrade everything the moment they taste even a tiny bit of financial progress. They get a raise and immediately move to a nicer apartment. They celebrate a promotion by signing for a newer car. They start eating out more because cooking feels too college. Every upgrade feels small and justified, but together they erase the one window where their money could have been compounding effortlessly in the background. The emotional trap is thinking you need to enjoy being young, as if investing early somehow means sacrificing your entire 20s, when in reality, it just means not accidentally locking yourself into a lifestyle that becomes impossible to support later. The punchline is simple. Your 20s are not supposed to look impressive. They are supposed to make your 30s and 40s feel easy. Point 5. Your future options depend on this milestone more than anything else. Having money invested early does something people completely underestimate. It gives you options long before it makes you rich, and those options quietly change the way you move through life. When you are 22 with $30,000 invested, you are not wealthy, but you are also not trapped. You can quit a job that is destroying your mental health without spiraling into panic. You can move cities without praying, your credit card limit magically increases. You can take a lower paying role that actually leads somewhere instead of clinging to a dead-end job just because the paycheck arrives on time. You make choices based on what is best for you, not what is safest for your bank account. And the wild part is that most people never experience this feeling in their 20s because they never give themselves the chance. They assume building savings or investments early will limit their freedom when it actually multiplies it. The emotional consequence of not having that cushion is living in constant low-grade financial anxiety, the kind that makes you say yes to things you do not want and stay in situations you have outgrown. Money does not buy luxury first. It buys breathing room, and that breathing room is worth more than any raise you will ever get. Point 6. The first $100,000 makes you the kind of person who can reach $1 million. Reaching your first $100,000 isn't just a financial milestone, it's an identity shift, because the person who builds that first chunk of wealth becomes the kind of person who can eventually build $1 million, and that transformation matters more than the money itself. To get to $100,000, you have to learn how to budget without feeling deprived, how to invest without constantly second-guessing yourself, and how to stay consistent even when it feels like nothing is happening. You learn to delay gratification, to say no to lifestyle creep, to avoid the trap of trying to look successful instead of quietly becoming successful. And the moment you hit that first six-figure mark, something changes in your brain. You stop wondering if building wealth is possible for someone like you and start thinking, okay, I can actually do this. You go from hoping to believing, from reacting to planning. The emotional consequence is huge. You stop feeling like money is this unpredictable, chaotic thing you can't control, and you start seeing it as something you can actually direct. The first $100,000 is the proof, not just that the math works, but that you work. Point 7. Your 20s are when you learn the money lessons that save you thousands later. Most people don't realize that their 20s are the decade where they learn every money lesson that will either save them thousands later or quietly sabotage them for years. And the frustrating part is that most of these lessons come disguised as harmless choices. In your 20s, blowing an extra $50 on takeout feels insignificant. Upgrading to a nicer apartment feels reasonable. Financing a newer car feels normal because everyone else does it. And treating every weekend like a celebration feels like part of being young. But all of those decisions build patterns, and those patterns turn into habits, and those habits eventually become your default financial behavior. The person who casually spends without tracking anything in their 20s becomes the person in their 30s wondering why their decent salary never seems to go anywhere. The person who ignores their credit score, never sets up automatic investments, and constantly convinces themselves they'll start saving soon, ends up spending their 30s recovering from mistakes they didn't even realize they were making at the time. And the emotional fallout from that hits hard. It feels like you wasted a decade without even noticing it slip by. It is simple but uncomfortable. Your 20s are not financially irrelevant just because the numbers are small. They are the decade that decides whether money becomes a tool you control or a problem you chase for the rest of your life. Point 8. The hardest part is the beginning, and that is exactly why you should start now. The beginning is always the part everyone hates, and ironically, it's the part that matters the most, because saving money in your 20s doesn't feel rewarding, exciting, or impressive. It feels like pushing a boulder uphill while everyone around you is sprinting downhill with iced coffees and weekend plans. In the early stages, every dollar you save feels like a sacrifice. Every investment feels tiny. Every progress update feels slow enough to make you question whether any of this is even worth it. And that's exactly why most people quit before they ever see results. They assume the difficulty means they're doing something wrong, when in reality, the difficulty is the proof they're doing something right. Building that first $100,000 requires saying no when everyone else is saying yes, choosing long-term stability over short-term fun, and dealing with the emotional frustration of watching your money grow at a pace that feels insulting. But here's the twist. The hard beginning is also what makes everything after it easier. The habits you build during this stage, budgeting, restraint, patience, consistency, are the same habits that make you unstoppable later, and the emotional payoff is massive. Once the momentum finally kicks in, and your money starts growing faster than you expected, you realize the early grind wasn't punishment, it was preparation. It is simple. The beginning hurts, but the beginning is what makes the rest of the journey feel effortless. So here's the shift. The financial milestone that most people miss in their 20s is not earning a certain salary or buying a certain house or hitting some social media approved lifestyle checkpoint. It is building that first $100,000 in invested assets while time is still on your side. That money will not just grow, it will grow you. It will give you discipline, clarity, confidence, and options. It will be the foundation for everything else in your financial life. And look, you do not need to be perfect. You do not need to invest a fortune. You just need to start today, because your future self is either going to thank you or resent you, and you get to decide which one. You do not need to look rich. You need to stop being stressed.